I'm gonna try and do a kind of summary slash preview or read through video. I'm recovering right now. I look gaunt. I haven't eaten in a while. My immune system's kind of doing backflips. And so I've been writing, and I have a new kind of outlook on what I want to present, not more like the focus of it, and what's really integral and necessary instead of, a whole plethora of information about consciousness and possibilities and all that is to come and has been talked about and will be. But there's a fundamental aspect of disclosure. There's a basis for what's going on, and the primary aspects has to do with cloning, advanced technology, artificial intelligence, and the hive mind system that resulted from that, and mind control, hybrid races, which is to do with the cloning and basically genetic engineering. From there, non-humans, genetic purity, what some of these toxification programs are really about, and how these elements, these aspects are integral because they're basically an attack upon the population, upon humanity, whether it's remnant from something far in the past or whether it was invented in the 40s and the 50s and 60s. Regardless, it's what is the primary threat, and not so much regardless of, but I guess in a way relative to, and it's still relative to know if we've found methods to overcome these threats. Because the truth is, there's really no magic button. There's no switch someone can flip, which then changes a person's vulnerability. It has to be within, and this includes the susceptibility of a person to fear and corruption, basically. So there's no easy way around that. There's no easy solution. And so I have a few write-ups, and they're pretty weird, but everything is. So a lot of this has to do with amorality or immorality, or basically the morals that we operate by, and basically what our conscience outlines for us. And for a human from childhood on, you don't really have to teach a person to have a conscience, at least like a child. And that's debatable to degrees, because some kids could steal, some kids want to punch other ones in the face, others are completely calm. But the idea is, if a person feels caught or focused on in that manner, they automatically feel embarrassed, and they want to undo that or avoid it. And so we have a natural tendency to adhere to morality and basically align with the more harmonious, compassionate, empathic version of interaction. For instance, kids normally aren't completely racist. That's something that gets brought up a lot. And so, and as well, they're not culturally programmed at that point, because everyone pretty much acts the same as a toddler. Possibly with varying intelligence levels and things like that, but not really to race at that point. Excuse me, but it's just natural variance. And so the main idea, well, I guess I should have figured out how to outline it, but it's really a continual process of trying to figure out how to outline and where to begin. Really the most important parts, I guess I could start at the top, which has to do with the cloning process and the origins of existence, and how, more or less, how everything relates to the system that we're in right now. there's a TV series, Dimension 404, and all the sci-fi coming out now is specifically for this purpose of unveiling what's already been done. And this is basically a guy who lives a seemingly normal life and lives with a roommate who hooks him up on a dating site, and he's supposedly matched with the girl who has every, like, a 100% match. She has a tattoo on her body that he, like, imagines would be the perfect girl. And so they get together and months go by, and he eventually rushes it and tries to, like, rush into marriage. And so she dumps him, and he doesn't leave right away, and, like, comes back and he's like, no, we gotta get through this. And she presses a button on her phone on one of the apps, I guess a dating app, and then two guys come in and put a bag over his head and pick him up and carry him out. And as they're trying to I guess knock him out or put him in the van, he shoves off of one who comes back and punches, and he ducks and knocks the other guy out, and he runs home. He's telling his roommate, who's, like, trying to console him, and then the roommate sticks him in the neck with a needle gun, which is actually the kind of needle gun or syringe, auto injector syringe, basically pressurized injectors. And then he wakes up in a factory, in a lab, being interrogated by a woman he saw that was in the beginning of the movie previously for what he believed was a speed dating, or actually just not a blind, I don't know what it was, just like a date, where he's talking to her and she's bored with him, and she's like, literally, like, you can leave. He's like quick or whatever. So she turns out to come out later, and they're in the lab, and she's interrogating him for how he thought he did on his performance. And he doesn't know what's going on, so she says, you haven't seen the exit video? Alright, we'll watch. And the video comes on, and it describes that he's a genetically engineered clone that is manufactured by a dating company who caters to people who will pay for a person to basically match all of their requirements, and that all of his memories are inserted, and he was manufactured right there in the lab, but he can't leave now because he's been returned, and because of clone extermination laws, he can't be tortured or basically killed on the spot, so his only option is to basically work in the factory as forced labor. And there's a whole bunch of clones there, and it's almost like The Island or something like that, like a short, a TV show version of that. And so this kind of narrows down to the idea of what really has been happening. I might just focus on this for this video because I have like 3 pages of stuff here. It's actually 3 documents with like multiple pages each. I'm going to post them soon. I don't know if they'll be out with this video. Eventually they're going to go into more or less a few chapters of a book, and it outlines the concept of what's gone on with the cloning. It's not just wealthy elite. It's not just a few wild games. There are factories where people are manufactured just for the purpose of, and this is the stuff that was not talked about in the show. It was not explicitly outlined. It was implied subtly in certain situations, especially with a CEO type guy who is made to be very pompous and uncaring. Like the clones eat some type of goop protein mix, and he's like eating steak and stuff, and it's like almost like he doesn't care. He'll enslave a person, it doesn't matter. He made them, so they're his property. That's the beginning of the idea of what's really gone on. The uncharted idea of what's going on that they didn't touch but will imply is basically that people are being manufactured for sexual gratification and programming. Let me see if I can refer to the write-up. Programming, basically ideas, control the population, programming to plant spies, to create psychopathic killers, to groom celebrities, to generate ideas and inventions and profit off of them. So all of this is going on, and the idea is, if it began with just a few people being cloned, or an individual, wealthy, whatever it is, and then went into sexual gratification and personal immorality, where would it stop? If they're willing to more or less rape a child, would they stop there? Imagine these people. If you're going to clone somebody and have them there and it's like, I own you now, where would that group, that person stop? Where is the line? Where is the fine print that's like, well, we can do this, but that's not. As soon as that first aspect is done, beyond even raping, the idea that you're going to make somebody and be like, I own you now, I made you, that alone is an abomination. It's playing God. And so basically, where would they stop there? Why would they? Would they have children fight in blood sport? Would they program the children to later become important people in the world, prominent members of society? You see where this is going. This became an entire breakaway civilization that is used not only for literally raping and killing people, one after another, sometimes literally, and actually often, in a row or in a group death match, but this is used for those covert reasons I said previously just now, to completely control the population, from spies to killers to prominent members of society, anything, to classify and interrogate and scan the population for people who are basically in the future probably going to be somebody who's important or somebody who's going to be a threat. So it became so much more than just like a funny, cute clone factory, dating site, even personal gratification thing. The idea is that if somebody's going to use this for personal gratification one time on the basis of programming somebody or having a sexual slave, eventually that develops into the desire to do whatever you want. Eventually that all the way eventually turns into not sexual depravity, but some type of complete spiritual depravity, some complete immorality, where more or less torturing people becomes a sport. Just like the blood sport of fighting, having people fight to the death. Okay, violence becomes involved, basically. Violence becomes a high, it becomes a distortion, and it becomes something that is sought after, like a pleasurable addiction, basically. No different than the sexual gratification and depravity. And so eventually, if it got to one, because it's an abomination, and gets to the sexual depravity, and that's an abomination, then it gets to violence and what's going on there, and that's an abomination, where will it stop, and what are the effects going to be on the population? And as well, where will the violence and the torture stop? Because they hit people over the head with a hammer, they stub people's toes, they get chainsaws and just begin to, in a row, chop people up. It goes as far as it could possibly go. That's the point. There is no limit to the end, and it's this where it's at. Because long ago, it went to the point of prostitution and child abuse and things like that, and that's been around for thousands of years, Babylon and stuff like that, and that became the manufacturing system. It became the organization, the corporation of abusing another person. And what we have now is everything in this movie or TV show, and there's a bunch of movies as well, all the way to the point of literally continual deathmatch, torture-based, not even mind control is a big portion of it, but there's also beyond the mind control of like, we're going to do this and it's going to have an output, it's going to have a reason, it's going to have some type of structure, and what's going on, it's just people stabbing people for no reason. It's literally an addiction. That's what became of it. And so where this goes is basically, what is this going to mean for the population? The idea is, what is a person to do if it gets so far that they're in one of these groups, or they're cloned, or whatever it is? Can a person change anything? And in these movies and The Island, or in these shows, that one, people basically developed a rebellion that was set off by a few people, and they overthrew the factory basically, and took the CEO, all the clones, and threw him in the recycler that like splattered him, which is pretty graphic and gory, and not the answer, because violence will just beget more violence, and there are too many CEOs, and the CEOs are cloned themselves. They thought of that. So the only way to really solve it is if it comes out into the world and everybody knows, and then everybody's looking around going, this is happening, and so we have to act accordingly and figure out basically who's in power, who's doing what. We need transparency in these secret operations, this technology, these bases, what's going on. And so the idea is, if nothing happens, then how could this impact the world to the point where we have an entire civilization whose genetic records are on database, and at any point in time they can be genetically replicated in a system And another aspect is, this isn't in the movie, but in reality, unless there's an AI system replicating the person who then acts as the original, which that person wouldn't have a soul, so it's like an animal at that point, or it's really like a computer or an automaton. Unless that's happening, which was also later on in these projects, they have to take the electromagnetic energy of the consciousness from the original souled being who's knocked out, asleep, sedated, comatose, whatever it is, and put that into the clone. Otherwise, the clone doesn't really carry the original person's essence. So the idea is they have all these areas and then all these pods of clones and things like that, and everybody's genetic information, and they farm souls from the population to bring them into the system so they could rape, molest, torture, whatever you want to program, whatever you want to call it, interrogate, farm for ideas, basically. So the population is farmed for their souls, let alone the soul energy farming system. It's literally that people are switched out for these clones so they have somebody to basically do this to. Because if it's just somebody sitting there while you're doing whatever you're doing to them, apparently it's not fun, not invigorating. And so they have the original humans brought into the situation, and we get basically a situation where if that is allowed to persist, humanity has no power. At any point in time, people can be cloned, brought into this program to do whatever they want to do. They can be switched out, replicated, then there's a replicant in the original person's spot. Person could be dead, no one would know a difference. They could be out in a factory, basically a base, being tortured or whatever you want to call it. It disrupts every boundary for civilization, for a civil progression of what we consider society that can be disrupted. Everything else is one-on-one. Somebody's committing a crime. War is the only thing closest to this. It's a mass destruction of mind, freedom, compassion, and basically flesh, harming people. War, is the only thing we have closest to that. But every personal boundary, every abomination is covered or connected to this process if it's allowed to exist in a way where it is basically people, imagine, again, go back to it, somebody's in a factory cloned. How could they get out? Imagine they can be continuously cloned. Death wouldn't even release the person from that situation. So that's the enslavement of a species if it's allowed to take place. The cloning, the Humai cloning company in China, and there are a few others I can't think right now. Not like Vision Tech. There's like some of them. They have like all these almost like sci-fi names, but they're all out there, and they're all active. They've been active, but now it's going public because people don't care. Apparently, there's like organ cloning factories, and people are like whatever. So the idea is, though, that unchecked results in the subjugation of an entire species. And it's something that requires our attention. And the idea is it's not just one or two or whatever it is. It's that whatever can happen has happened already. If, in 40 years it took to go to the lowest of the low, normally that's what we would think. But imagine if someone's going to begin by cloning a person to do whatever they want with, it already went that low. And the next day, they were like, we can just kill all these people and clone them again and do it all over again. And that's our sport now. And so it already, as soon as it happened, it was as low as it could possibly get. The only thing that's going to go from there is a select group of people who have access to this, and a group of people who don't and can't really fight it in any other way. And so this was just one view. The other aspect of this is that another way, imagine if somebody had a plan to free people from a kind of oppression such as this, and that person spoke openly or was noticed to have a unique perspective in life which is psychologically and mathematically, statistically likely to produce a potential use or a potential threat to that system, then that person could be picked up as soon as this was detected and sent to the cloning station for experimentation, torture, trauma-based mind control, sexual programming, or sexual torture, so on and so forth. And genetic engineering, and breeding, eugenics, things like that. if that happens, if that's possible, then the future can be monitored. The future of problems, that could arise could be monitored. And that's just from scanning the population, psychologically assessing who's likely to be a threat. That's not even from using temporal viewing technology that can bend space and time and allow people to see what's possibly going to happen. Literally on a monitor. So that's the idea. It just goes so far beyond what we can imagine or deal with that the only option is to do something now. And so basically, that's what disclosure is about as far as phase 1, which is based more or less celebrity cloning and corruption. It goes into the advanced technology and how that made it possible, and then the advanced technology has its own phase 2 section, which leads into basically the secret space program. And the secret space program and, the technology of all of that goes into phase 3, which is the origins of humanity, collective consciousness, but more so, the cosmic mind, cosmic consciousness, these intelligences that are so powerful and massive, they are responsible for our reality. And all this stuff that went on in ancient history and where we are in time, the origins, the nature of the universe in time and consciousness, which is phase 3, and that you can't really go further than that once you start uncovering that stuff. But it begins with the corruption and celebrity cloning and goes into the advanced technology. And so the idea is that, imagine it gets so far out of hand that entire armies are created and there are continuous factories of individuals who are remotely operated or even functioning as completely autonomous cyborg units. Without a soul required, these units would appear human but would contain no true human consciousness. Basically, it's a replication of a species. It's the replacing of a species bit by bit. There's a saying in these covert situations, it's obvious if you take a person and you tell them you like this, this, and this, guess what? Now you're this person. You like this, this, and this. Ta-da, you're different. The person's like, no. Okay, but say you have a list of 10, 20, 80, whatever it is, things, and imagine if you're psychologically assessing them, you get the key points. Like you're a building, a structure, a spider web, whatever it is, you get the key points that when you change those, the whole thing is changed. And so the integral, central, innermost, subconscious points. And so then, the main thing, you can't just go up to somebody, you like this, and okay, well now that's not going to work. But if you change one by one all the small supporting variables that are more or less integrated, related by these central points, all the way up until you get to the central point, then you can change that central point, and one by one, bit by bit, an entire person can be replicated, basically replaced or replicated. You can't replace the part or the whole, but you can one by one replace the sum of the parts, and the whole will be, or the part, and the sum of the parts will be replaced, and the whole basically get a whole new manufactured psychology of an individual. And so, if that's going on, basically, there's no bounds to limits. Another term I'm sure you've heard is that the mind has no firewall. This also has to do with the projects as far as what has been done to produce a possibility of resistance, as well as basically was a form of infiltration of people beginning to do this. And so here's where it gets weird. I'm going to probably end this off with this one thing. I plan on going through 20 of these, but I only get to one. So with the time viewing technology, it's time dilation technology. You can make a bubble like a magnifying glass, and it's 1 second per second. Then you get into here, it's 10 seconds per second, and then it goes back down. Which I wrote about this in the first chapters of The Unveiling of the Hidden Knowledge, and it's pretty interesting. But that is a way where the mind must be strong enough to understand that. It's kind of like those rides in amusement park where they basically, like the waterfall rides, where just go down the big hill. Going up or down the magnified part is like that for your mind, where it stretches and throws you for a loop, and if it goes too far, it fragments. And so basically, the time dilation, temporal dilation, permits extended experience within shorter amounts of time than on the surface. Say you're underground or in a simulation or whatever it is, and this is basically compressed time. You can have compressed experience within a finite amount of time, which means you can dilate, bend, you can bend the rules of perception, if you will. Because remember, the brain is just electromagnetic energy aligned and interacting in a certain way at a certain rate. We have a frame rate of perception. Anything that occurs too fast, like on the TV or something like that, you don't pick it up. But then imagine you change the way your brain works through these basic neurological systems that can integrate, interface, synchronize with the brain, and then alter them. Well, if you increase the rate of your brain now in a safe manner, you do it too much, the brain overheats. That's another biological or physiological effect. And now the previously subconscious stream of information that would fit in between every 30 frames per second flash of imagery on a TV, well, now you can perceive it. You could read out, the alphabet that's before was invisible. So now you do that to the max, you can watch a movie in 5 minutes when it would take an hour otherwise. Or have an experience. Meet up in a collective realm, talk about what's going to happen, and then go back out. Imagine in the middle of an attack, right before they hit, everybody plans out what they're going to do, slows down time, plans it out, and then comes back, and the possibilities are endless. But here's where it went. So basically, as long as it would take for all of this to occur, for the corruption to basically grab hold to the farthest degrees, it has already happened. It doesn't take time anymore. Temporal dilation literally makes it so that long, multiple year stretches of figuring this out, developing technology, happens instantly through the artificial intelligence systems, which basically permits the brain to work faster than more or less it should with biological limitations that we have naturally. And so, because it's unsafe for the brain to do that otherwise. You can't really you can't overclock the brain without having some type of physiological side effect. And so if groups take control of the systems, which everything's basically happened already, and then use them to sever humanity from organic life through a distortion of the DNA, then this basically spells disaster as far as one can imagine throughout the civilization, because we don't even have the capacity to think fast enough to comprehend the methods that would be used. Again, imagine whatever counter we come up with, the split second before that goes into action, they don't even need temporal viewing technology. They just distort time. They go down, give themselves a week to figure it out in broken segments so they don't lose their mind as well. With certain drugs and genetic modifications, these scientists made it so that they can withstand that type of distortion effect and not experience side effects, or at least to nullify them or remedy them. Every counter that the public or a person without this technology could come up with would be countered. The counter would be countered. It would be resolved because we couldn't think fast enough as they could using this technology. In the same sense, though, if whatever was going to happen in terms of advancement, depravity, and development, basically on all angles of intelligence going up or depravity going up, it no longer takes years, months, whatever. It doesn't take time. It happens instantly. As soon as somebody is exposed to this technology, as soon as a group figures out that they can do this, and all the groups, this is coming out now because these small groups, they've been held down by authoritarian systems. If somebody makes $100,000 and realizes he can put together a fairly simple computer system now that's cheap, or a corporation that's got a few $1 billion and isn't owned by the government or something like that, and they figure out they can do that, well, we're going to have a problem on our hands because they're going to be pumping out UFOs and mind control technology and electrogravitic, scalar weaponry and stuff like that, and it's not going to be owned by some central authority holding everyone back. You might think that's good. Well, good luck with that, because that spells disaster, basically, when it becomes free range for the directed energy weapons, the cloning. Okay, it's just happening with any cartel member that has enough power and access to the technology. We don't want that. At that point, that's why, a little secret, some of these groups are as dark as they can be because they are holding that down so that everyone else is like, that's awesome, I want to do the same stuff. Let's rape and kill and molest and subjugate. Well, those people are now on the leash of the main people that held everything down previously. And if not, it would just be a bunch of those wild animals running around everywhere. They'd own everything. So, little secret, having a big main dark group is actually better than having just a free-for-all of what's going on. Not really many people can understand that, but unless you've seen what goes on in these situations, these timelines, whatever you want to call it, where the technology was just everyone was let to do whatever they want, and there was no main group holding it down, basically central authority, you can't imagine what happened. Everybody, there's a depravity, and then this cosmic system of depravity that people can't individually manage and fight or resist takes over everything, because there's no collection or organization of even darkness, and it's just a free-for-all. We don't want that. That's what we're getting close to now, because technology is getting more accessible. So we have to get to a point where the public is aware of this, and the public can resist, and the public can withstand transparency with knowledge that basically fractures people's minds just at the thought of that the possibilities are, possible or present. But basically, so the technology allows everything to happen instantly. This is also related to the intelligence aspects, where imagine people have to, go through databases, research, experiments, lectures, whatever you want to call it, education more or less, linear, physical, categorized, and segmented. Well, imagine they can just interface neurologically with the database system that then feeds them information at a rate that won't overload their brain, their memory, and can cover a year of information within a few weeks. If that even. Possibly, nowadays, a few hours. Imagine then everyone with access to this technology goes through that process. At that point, there is no deviation or variation in intelligence, the intelligent capacity from one group to the other, or individual to an individual. Everyone is literally as smart as you could possibly be as soon as they're plugged into this system. So it's part of this kind of hive minding stuff. That's where it leads into, but it also, and as well, the depravity. Imagine they have the capacity to bend time and do anything they want. Well, then the depravity happens as soon as possible. But as well, there's the intelligence factor becomes, in a way, uniform, and in that sense, also, nobody without that technology can really gain access to the type of intelligence that is capable with it. So everything that we can imagine, some type of a sci-fi movie, one of the Marvel movies, takes years and a whole timeline to expand and understand. As soon as this technology, the main three, artificial intelligence, neurological interface, cloning, with artificial intelligence, neurological interface to cloning, they're kind of segmented or connected, and it's really only two that we're focusing on, and three, directed energy weaponry, temporal dilation, stuff like that, through the cloning, through the supercomputer systems, and with the artificial intelligence kind of guiding that. As soon as that is grabbed up by whatever nation, whatever cartel, and there's not somebody holding that down, it's as far as it can go instantly. That's it. They can plug in all the information they need. They can plug in and access any level of depravity with no response, what's the word I'm thinking of? With no ramifications, consequences. At least there is a central authority that says you want to get in with this, but we're the masters of darkness. So you want to get in, you get in with us. And they're actually holding the whole system down. If they weren't there, it'd just be a free-for-all. Whatever group that had, $1 million, that's it. Done. They're blasting, from an electrogravitic craft, cloning people, and blow them up. They just beam back to the base and start it all over again. It'd be the end of the world. Either way, that's a little bit about the whole idea of what I'm trying to bring forth here. And I'm going to post probably this up real quick. But it goes on, and basically it leads into, the farthest that it could go has been gone. Well, then where does that lead to? What is the farthest? What are the farthest results of people going into the farthest aspects of depravity and advancement? Basically, we're in a time loop situation where this civilization is not being taken over. It was taken over long ago. We just don't know it because it happened so quickly, and the technology is so advanced now that we're basically forever in an echo behind what has actually taken place. Where that goes into, where it matters is more or less that there's soul entrapment paradoxes, which is basically if a person is entangled in a quantum level genetically through this hybridization system, through some of this mind control system, the hive mind system, the neurological cloning and assimilation, that could influence them in not only this reality, but in the multitudes of realities or frequencies or timelines. You can just call them parallel universal realities or dimensions, if you want to just use that word. The DNA connects to all of them, and so if the DNA gets altered, that could basically modify a person forever, for eternity, meaning this ends and goes out. Well, whoever was entangled within that, there are methods for cleaning the DNA, for repairing it. However, if the person's consciousness is so entangled with the distortion, then altering the DNA would undoubtedly alter and erase them in a way. Imagine one by one you replace those aspects of consciousness until the sum of the parts is different. You can't replace the total, but you can replace the parts until the sum of the whole is somebody new. Well, imagine they're distorted so much that the person they think they are, and they know that for themselves, if you repair their DNA, their consciousness, it's a new person all of a sudden, even if that's the person that's original and that's the person that's healed. From their point of view, they died when that happened, so it would be like a shock to the system. So that's the ultimate kind of aspect, that we're in a system where what can happen eternally, a person's genetic sovereignty, genetic purity, can be influenced by what is taking place now, and and this is going to be the next talk, and more or less the few chapters, and possibly some not interviews, but like discussions, where basically we think it's happening. We think something is happening. It all already happened. Tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of years ago. It already happened long, long ago, and the only reason we're seeing this happen now is that we're actually finally getting out of it. That when it first happened, nobody knew. If they can wipe people's memories now, they can influence mass consciousness, they can operate on the system as if it's a type of electromagnetic consciousness grid system. Whatever we're seeing happen that we think we're avoiding already happened long ago, and we're finally getting out of that time tunnel where history has been repeating itself for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And so the next video or type up I publish will probably have a lot to do with that, because it's hard to describe it. All of this goes back to the origins of humanity. If we're organic beings, okay, then how was the first person born? You can't say it was a person that gave birth to them, because people don't give birth to themselves. It's not possible. It's called autopoiesis or poiesis, and gods do that. Gods auto-create, self-create. We don't do that. That's not possible. So if it was a human, it was a godlike human. If it was a godlike human, it wasn't the genetic activation, the genetic makeup we have today. It was somebody different. If it wasn't a human, then it was most likely some type of technological system. We basically have the possibility of both, to the point where if the first being is created, it's through some type of cloning process. And this is where a lot of the ancient texts come in. I'm about to wrap this up too. The original human was apparently a woman who took a piece of herself and impregnated herself with it, which is basically like an organic version of cloning. Cloning is basically the same thing. You take a version of yourself, find a compatible female, and that female that matches the DNA can harbor the individual, and basically tricks the body into replicating itself through another person, surrogate. And so we have that as a possibility, that it is a technologically facilitated process in the beginning of time, the beginning of humanity. And we have also the possibility that there's a way for vibrations, information, frequencies to coalesce down into matter in a material, energetic construct, which we call the physical universe, this dimension. So if that happened, then we have to wonder, what is the physical universe? Is that not simply the same way as saying it was in a way a cloning situation, but just not a little or big device, supercomputers and a tube or anything, but that the universe we're in is a type of organic, living, technological system device that creates life out of the vibrations, the mind waves of some cosmic being, dropping those vibrations down in density until matter is formed. Basically, everything is tied to this. From the generation of humans, the origins of humanity, the origins of the universe, what the true nature of the universe and consciousness is, and how how it all works. Basically, it's 50-50 until you get to the point where we go back and do it, where we go forward and repeat it, or gain some access to collapse that into a direct possibility. It's either or. Because how are you going to tell? We don't have access to anything. But then this is where the unveiling comes out. Phase 3. This would be where corruption, celebrity cloning, things like that, advanced technology, and what they discovered down into cosmic intelligence, to the point where our DNA carries the signature of some type of cosmic mind. And they don't really tell anybody what it is, but they say the answers are there, and the scientists know. They know what happened. But they know, but we don't know, because basically what you believe will connect you with one or the other. That's kind of how it works. And as well, the last thing I'm going to say is that this infection, this modification that enables a person's ego to go out of whack, to basically be programmable and related to fear and, lower consciousness motivations. That is the infection. The ego, the death is the infection. The other part I didn't say is this relates to death. This relates to physical, linear, biological ego consciousness. That's the result of the false light system. It's the disease, the fact that we die, the fact that we can't communicate with our multiple reality selves, we can't contact our ancestors through our DNA. We do, we can, but a lot of people don't, or they don't know it. And so that is basically the destruction from people to a place, from a level where we could create ourselves. We had the power to initiate civilizations into this type of simulated, broken down version of reality where people have to pay for, life. People have to pay to be alive. They have to pay somebody. They have to get permission to live. And it's all a form of programming. And it sounds kind of wild, but the DNA permits it. It's allowed some, lobsters and jellyfish don't die. They can just grow back to a younger age and then restart. And, it seems like the universe would kind of do that on purpose because they're more or less bottom feeders. So it's like, oh, there's a lot of junk down there they need to eat. So it's like, make them immortal. F it. That'll work. And but it means that the laws can be bent. We can do anything if we were in harmonious alignment with the notion of the universe. The universe seems to be providing or producing, which is continuity, balance, continuity, life giving, life progressing, and not stagnation and fear and chaos and all that stuff. That doesn't exist. If it was about chaos, we'd sit here and be like, look how dead everything is, and isn't it great? That's the society of death. That's not people. If it's about harmony, we look at stuff and say it's pretty colors, birds chirping, the air and the weather is cleared up, it's harmonious. We see that because that's what we're generated out of. And there's about a lot of different stuff going on. Two races, one generated out of harmony, one out of disharmony. But basically, the last thing I'm going to say is that this world is an illusion. One must be able to overcome fear, or they will destroy themselves with the release of this ultimate power. Just simply awakening the subconscious mind and the power of memories and the power of the DNA. This world is an illusion. It is Westworld. That's where the idea for Westworld came about, that Earth is Westworld. It's a programmed reality. And I'm going to end it there because there's like 30 more on this new page that I just opened up, and I guess I can split it up in a bunch of other videos. Yeah, research everything I said if you think it's far out. Technology's been available and open since Tesla, and honestly there's depictions, not hieroglyphs, but petroglyphs, drawing, carvings in the cave walls and stones and tablets, cuneiform, of the same stuff happening thousands and thousands of years ago. So we're in a situation where we think something is happening when it already happened, and we're just catching up to this view, and it's our consciousness that is basically in a lag. It's a continual lag where our biological consciousness is perceptual and based upon this type of delay system, but our awareness is capable of actually seeing the truth, but you can't sit there and use your mouth to talk about it at that point. It's just done. And so that's what we're actually also having to come to terms with and having to get involved with, as that is the key to breaking the programming. That we're not looking and listening to what they're telling us, we're knowing within through self-awareness. We have to cultivate that self-awareness. And the only way to really do that is to be in harmony with everything else, because free will is the most self-aware thing to be and to do, to express. Whereas if you're being controlled and you don't have your free will and you're reacting and you're being programmed and you can't, resist the anger or the desire or whatever it is, that's not free will. That's also not harmonious. It's something else. Programming a person, controlling a person, and what a person is, what a man or a woman, a living man or woman or child, is something that someone that experiences. And so what is there to experience if the integral part, you, the experiencer, the observer, is cut out of the equation? So harmony, free will, truth, compassion, those are the values of the original blueprint of humanity, which is the human soul. And this whole thing is about unveiling the human soul and experiencing that and living in that light for the world, instead of this type of illusory system that's going on, which is more or less like a big clone factory, big programmable mind control factory. System's changing, lots of stuff is changing. Hope you see the new video with Devin. He's a pretty interesting person. A lot of stuff going on. Thank you for listening. Thanks to everybody that does listen. Keep your energy high, keep your vibrations high. I've been sitting here like not eating clearing up, getting over some downtime for the past couple days, and I just have the idea of talking to people and talking about this stuff, and I get as excited as, you know, I could probably do a backflip right now if my shoulder was messed up. So it's just what it is, and it's also spring is coming out, so you know, this is like an internal spring dance going on. It is what it is, basically, and we all got to work together. Not work together, but we all got to unify in the sense that we protect each other, we liberate ourselves and our, you know, protect ourselves, and look at each other like a family in that sense. Everything else that tells us to fight and kick each other in the shins and stuff like that has nothing to do with anything. That's not what life is about. That's not what harmony is about. The harmony of existence. It's really looking at the forest and saying, oh, look at all those dead leaves. There's a big pile of dead leaves with wood on top. Oh, it's a living forest. It's alive. It's in harmony. All right, thank you.